here's something most people don't talk about. Right now, at this exact moment, there's a 60% chance you're thinking about work. Even if you're watching this on a Sunday afternoon, even if you're supposed to be relaxing. And here's the really disturbing part. You're not alone. 60% of American workers admit they have zero boundaries between work and personal life. None. But that's not even the worst of it. What if I told you that the country we live in, the one we constantly hear is the land of opportunity, ranks 29th out of 41 developed nations when it comes to work-life balance? 29th! We're not just behind Europe, we're trailing countries most Americans couldn't point to on a map. And before you think this is just another rant about working too hard, let me show you what's actually happening beneath the surface. Because what's going on in America's workforce right now isn't just unsustainable, it's creating a crisis that's literally changing the structure of people's brains. Let's start with something that sounds impossible. In 2024, employee well-being hit its lowest point ever recorded. Not during the pandemic, not during the 2008 recession, right now. Research from Johns Hopkins analyzed over 1.3 million workers across nearly 3,000 organizations and found that Americans are more burned out, more stressed, and more disconnected from their jobs than at any point in modern history. But here's where it gets interesting. When you dig into who's suffering the most, a pattern emerges that nobody wants to talk about. Managers and senior leaders? Their well-being scores actually went up in 2024. They're feeling better than ever. Meanwhile, regular employees and individual contributors saw their scores plummet. For the first time in years, there's a massive gap between how leadership experiences the workplace versus everyone else. Think about that for a second. The people making decisions about your workload, your schedule, your life, they genuinely believe everything is fine. They've returned to normal. But for the people actually doing the work, normal doesn't exist anymore. Now, you might be wondering, how did we get here? How did a country built on innovation and progress become the only developed nation on Earth with zero guaranteed paid time off? Because that's the reality. The United States is literally the only member of the OECD that doesn't federally require employers to give workers any vacation days. None. Not one. Compare that to Italy, which ranks number 1 for work-life balance, where only 3% of employees work over 50 hours per week. Or look at the Netherlands, where less than 0.5% work long hours. Meanwhile, in America, 94% of professional service workers clock more than 50 hours every single week. That's not a 40-hour work week with some overtime. That's an extra 520 hours per year, the equivalent of 13 additional 40-hour weeks. And here's the kicker. Americans actually have vacation days. On average, workers get about 15 days of paid time off. But 62% don't use them all. In 2023, Americans left over $312 billion worth of vacation time on the table. That's not a typo. $312 billion. Some people, 5.5% of workers, didn't take a single day off the entire year. Why? Well, 32% of remote workers say it's actually harder to take time off when working from home. Think about the irony there. We fought for the flexibility to work remotely, and now a third of us feel trapped by it. The office followed us home, and now there's no escape. Let me paint you a picture of what this actually looks like. Meet Sarah. She's a composite of real workers, but her story is playing out in millions of homes right now. Sarah works in tech, hybrid schedule, good salary, unlimited PTO. Sounds great, right? Except she hasn't taken a real vacation in 2 years. She checks her email 81% of the time outside work hours, including weekends. She worked through her last vacation, and when her manager suggested she take time off, she couldn't actually do it because there was nobody to cover her projects. Sarah represents what 66% of millennials and 74% of Gen Z are experiencing, moderate to high burnout. And it's not just stress. Research shows that chronic work stress physically changes the brain. When you're in a constant state of survival mode, the parts of your brain responsible for creativity, problem solving, and inspiration literally shrink. Your brain prioritizes threat detection over everything else. This explains something you've probably noticed but couldn't quite name: that feeling of being constantly on edge, the inability to enjoy free time because you're mentally running through tomorrow's tasks, the exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. That's not laziness. That's your brain rewiring itself for a workplace that demands constant vigilance. Now, here's a twist nobody saw coming. Remember when companies pushed everyone back to the office? 81% of firms lost talent because of return to office mandates. But are they changing course? No. Nearly half still require staff in the office 4 to 5 days a week, and 70% plan to increase or maintain these requirements in 2025. But the real story isn't about where we work, it's about the growing divide in who's suffering. Women report 42% burnout rates compared to 30% for men. Women also take 10% less vacation time and are more comfortable using sick days than actual vacation days. Think about what that means. They're literally more comfortable pretending to be physically ill than admitting they need rest. Hispanic workers face stress levels 46% higher than the average, with very high burnout rates nearly double those of non-Hispanic workers. Younger workers under 25 have seen their workplace well-being decline steadily since the pandemic. And employees with disabilities, LGBTQ workers, and deskless workers report burnout rates up to 26% higher than average. This isn't just a personal problem anymore. It's costing employers an average of $4,000 per employee annually in lost productivity and health effects. For physicians alone, burnout costs the U.S. healthcare system $4.6 billion per year. Every doctor who quits due to burnout costs their organization between $500,000 and $1 million. But corporations aren't stupid. They see these numbers. So what are they doing about it? Well, 73% of workers say work-life balance is a core factor when job searching. 61% say they won't accept a job that impacts their balance. 48% would quit if work made it impossible to enjoy life. Yet when employees were asked if their organization makes work-life balance possible, 38% said their company never or rarely does. Here's what's really happening. Companies are offering solutions that don't actually solve anything. Unlimited PTO sounds incredible until you realize only 15% of American companies actually offer it. And for those who do, many employees end up taking less time off than they would with a traditional policy because there's an unspoken pressure to prove you're not taking advantage. Wellness programs, mental health days, meditation apps, these are band-aids on a bullet wound. 64% of workers say technology changes won't impact their stress levels. They know what would actually help. A 4-day work week, 69%, increased flexibility, 66%, decreased workload, 63%. But here's the fundamental problem. The American workplace operates on a broken assumption that more hours equal more productivity, except research proves the opposite. Studies show that remote and hybrid workers report the same productivity levels as office workers, but with higher rates of anxiety and depression. 48% of remote workers regularly work outside scheduled hours. 44% say they're working more in 2024 than in 2023. We're working more, producing the same amount, and destroying our mental health in the process. And it's creating some truly bizarre situations. 68% of Americans work during vacation, not occasionally checking email, actively working. 35% feel there's an expectation to work while on vacation. 18% say their boss explicitly requires them to check emails during time off. Let me be clear about what that means. You're being paid for vacation days you're not actually allowed to fully take. It's a benefit in name only. Now, some of you watching this are thinking, well, that's just how it is. Everyone deals with it. And that's exactly the problem. We've normalized something that would have been considered dystopian 20 years ago. We've accepted that work owns us, that boundaries are negotiable, that burnout is just the price of success. But here's what nobody's saying out loud. This system is collapsing. Employee engagement hit a decade low in 2024. Only 31% of workers report being engaged. That means 69% of people are either neutral or actively disengaged from their jobs. And when you dig into why people are quitting, money isn't even the top reason. 37% leave due to poor engagement or toxic culture. 31% quit due to burnout or lack of balance. Only 16% leave primarily for better pay. People aren't quitting jobs. They're quitting a lifestyle that's killing them. So what do we do? How do we actually fix this? Because complaining about the problem doesn't pay rent. First, understand that this isn't about individual willpower. You can't yoga your way out of a systemic problem. The data shows that companies with effective management practices see 60% less employee stress than those with poor management. This is a leadership issue, not a worker resilience issue. Second, recognize that the disconnect between managers and employees is creating a dangerous blind spot. 68% of managers think their team's well-being is fine or improving, while 45% of employees say it's gotten worse. If leadership can't see the problem, they certainly